Let's talk about something you see every day, the humble tomato. It's a staple in salads, sauces, and sandwiches, and it's so common that we rarely stop to think about where it comes from or how it gets to our tables. But behind every tomato is a story of global trade, innovation, and unexpected twists. For decades, if you bought a tomato in the US during winter, it almost certainly came from Mexico. Mexican farmers worked tirelessly, harvesting millions of pounds of tomatoes to meet America's year-round appetite for fresh produce, even when snow blanketed US fields. This was a massive multi-billion-dollar trade. Mexico was the undisputed king of tomatoes, supplying the US with what many called red gold. The tomato industry fueled local economies, created jobs, and shaped the landscape of rural Mexico. The system seemed unshakable, a well-oiled machine that had run for generations. But then, almost overnight, everything changed. A single policy decision, one signature on a document, upended the entire industry, sending shockwaves through farms, factories, and grocery stores. The North American tomato trade became a high-stakes drama involving 3 nations and billions of dollars. Suddenly, tomatoes weren't just produce, they were pawns in a geopolitical chess game. The old map was torn up, and the flow of red gold was diverted. Trade routes shifted, and the familiar journey of the tomato was rewritten almost overnight. This isn't just about agriculture, it's about power, policy, and the food on your plate. Every tomato you slice is a product of international deals and economic strategy. The shift was seismic, like a river suddenly changing course after a century. The ripple effects reached farmers, truckers, retailers, and families across the continent. Canada, a country better known for maple syrup and hockey, suddenly emerged as a tomato powerhouse. Greenhouses sprang up, and Canadian growers seized the opportunity to fill the gap. This was no minor adjustment. It was a revolution in the produce aisle. Shoppers noticed new labels, new flavors, and new prices, all thanks to a shift in global supply. New technologies, new climates, and a strategic pivot caught everyone off guard. High-tech greenhouses and climate control allowed tomatoes to thrive in places they never had before. How did this happen? Who wins and who loses? The answers are complex, involving business leaders, politicians, and everyday workers. We'll break down the policies that started it all, examining the fine print and the big decisions that changed the tomato's fate. We'll follow the money, $2.80 billion, as it moved from one country to another, reshaping economies and livelihoods along the way. We'll hear from Mexican farmers who lost markets, Canadian entrepreneurs who saw new opportunities, and you, the American consumer, whose choices drive the entire system. This is more than a story about a fruit. It's a story about resilience, adaptation, and the hidden forces that shape what we eat. It's about how a change in one corner of the world can create waves felt thousands of miles away, altering dinner tables and destinies alike. The tomato trade has been transformed, and the landscape of North American agriculture will never be the same. The question is, what does it mean for all of us? How will these changes affect our choices, our farmers, and our future? Let's find out. Let's get after it. For decades, Mexico dominated the tomato market, earning a reputation as the world's tomato powerhouse. Its fields stretched for miles, painting the landscape in vibrant reds and greens. The country's unique climate, especially in regions like Sinaloa and Baja California, meant that tomatoes could be grown and harvested all year long, regardless of the season. While U.S. fields sat idle in the cold winter months, Mexican farms kept working, ensuring that American tables were always stocked with fresh tomatoes even when snow covered northern fields. This was more than just farming. It was a massive industry, employing hundreds of thousands of people and fueling entire communities, from rural villages to bustling towns. Every year, Mexico exported over $2 billion in tomatoes to the U.S., supplying more than half of all the fresh tomatoes Americans ate and filling supermarket shelves across the country. The partnership between the two countries ran deep. Mexican growers perfected their supply chains, investing in technology and logistics to meet strict U.S. standards and keep the tomatoes flowing north. But this dominance came with a hidden cost. Almost all of Mexico's tomato business depended on the U.S. market, making the industry vulnerable to sudden changes. With such a reliable customer, there was little incentive for Mexican growers to diversify or seek new markets. The focus remained on the U.S. Any shift in U.S. policy, tariffs, or regulations could be devastating, threatening the livelihoods of countless families and entire regions. The Mexican tomato industry stood atop a mountain of success, but the ground beneath was always a bit shaky, with risks lurking just out of sight. When the storm finally came, the industry found itself directly in its path, exposed and unprepared for the challenges ahead. The Red River of tomatoes symbolized not just economic integration but also the risks of putting all your eggs, or tomatoes, in one basket. The stage was set for a dramatic shift, as uncertainty began to creep into the once booming industry, and that shift was coming fast, threatening to reshape Mexico's tomato kingdom forever. Then, everything changed. Under pressure from U.S. growers, especially in Florida, the government rewrote the rules. American farmers claimed Mexican tomatoes were being dumped at unfairly low prices. The U.S. ended the Tomato Suspension Agreement, which had set minimum prices for Mexican imports. In its place, steep tariffs and stricter inspections. Every truckload from Mexico now faced new taxes and delays. Costs soared and spoilage increased. Many Mexican farms couldn't survive the new reality. The once reliable flow of tomatoes slowed to a trickle. The message, the old way, was over. But this policy didn't just hurt Mexico. It created a huge gap in the U.S. market. Someone had to fill it. Who would step up? The answer came from the North Canada. While the U.S. built trade barriers, Canada built greenhouses, massive, high-tech, climate-controlled facilities. In Ontario and British Columbia, these greenhouses could grow perfect tomatoes year-round. When the U.S. market needed winter tomatoes, Canadian growers were ready. American grocery chains quickly turned to Canada for a stable supply. The U.S.-Canada border allowed for easy, tariff-free trade. Canadian tomatoes became the safe, reliable choice. Major U.S. retailers signed long-term contracts with Canadian growers. This wasn't a temporary fix, it was a fundamental shift. The Canadian government supported the boom with research and incentives. Canada's greenhouse industry was suddenly in full bloom. Technology, strategy, and timing changed everything. The northern bloom had arrived. Let's follow the money. Every dollar tells a story, and in this case, it's a story that spans borders, livelihoods, and entire economies. Before the policy shift, Mexico exported $2.5 billion in tomatoes to the U.S. Canada, just $400 million. Mexican fields were bustling and Canadian greenhouses played a smaller role. But after new tariffs and trade barriers, Mexico's tomato exports collapsed to about $100 million, a staggering 95% drop almost overnight. Billions vanished from Mexican farms and businesses, leaving workers and families facing uncertainty and hardship. So, where did all that money go? It didn't disappear. It moved north, straight to Canada. Canadian growers seized the opportunity, ramping up production. Their exports to the U.S. soared to $3.2 billion, transforming their industry almost overnight. That's a $2.8 billion shift. Canada's gain, Mexico's loss. The scale of this change is hard to overstate. This is more than a headline, it's a massive transfer of wealth and jobs, affecting thousands of families and entire communities. The U.S. policy didn't just change trade, it redrew the economic map, shifting the balance of power in North American agriculture. The numbers are stark, and they don't lie. Behind every statistic is a real impact on people's lives. A once stable trade was upended in just 2 years, leaving a trail of winners and losers in its wake. The tomato trade's winners and losers were decided by a single policy, one decision with far-reaching consequences. The money tells the story. The consequences are real, and as the dust settles, the effects are still unfolding, shaping the future of trade in North America. In Mexico, this isn't just a statistic, it's a crisis. Fields lie fallow, packing houses are empty, and unemployment has soared. Small farmers and workers, whose lives depended on tomatoes, have lost everything. Local businesses that relied on the tomato economy are struggling to survive. Many feel betrayed by their longtime trading partner. The loss of jobs is forcing families to migrate, breaking up communities. The Mexican government is scrambling for solutions, but replacing the U.S. market is nearly impossible. The damage is done. This is a harsh lesson in the risks of economic dependency. The hardship is a direct result of a policy decision made far away. Trade deals and tariffs have real human consequences. For countless Mexican families, the tomato trade shift means hardship and uncertainty. The cost is measured in more than dollars. In Canada, it's a different story. A boom fueled by the $2.8 billion shift. In places like Leamington, Ontario, greenhouses are expanding rapidly. Thousands of new jobs are being created in agriculture, technology, and logistics. These aren't simple glass houses, they're high-tech food factories. Hydroponics and climate control create perfect growing conditions year-round. Canadian tomatoes are consistent, high-quality, and sustainable. Investors are pouring money into the sector, driving more innovation. Artificial intelligence and robotics are making greenhouses even more efficient. Canada is building a world-leading agricultural tech industry. The government's support has paid off. Canada has filled the gap left by Mexico and then some. The tomato trade shakeup is a story of strategic investment and rapid growth. For Canada, it's a golden era. What does this mean for you, the American shopper? Look at the labels. Product of Canada now dominates the shelves. Prices spiked at first, but as Canadian supply stabilized, they leveled off. Canadian greenhouse tomatoes are uniform, long-lasting, and marketed as high quality. Some notice a difference in taste compared to sun-ripened Mexican tomatoes. The produce aisle's geography has changed. U.S. policy aimed to help domestic farmers, but instead swapped one foreign supplier for another. The real winner? Canada's high-tech greenhouses. For consumers, the new normal is Canadian tomatoes. Your salad is now part of a continental economic shift. The story of your tomato is a story of global trade, and it's still evolving. What's the final takeaway? A single U.S. policy decision triggered a $2.8 billion realignment in the tomato trade. Mexico's dominance collapsed. Canada rose as the new powerhouse. For Mexico, it's been economic disaster and hardship. For Canada, a high-tech boom and new wealth. For the U.S., the main beneficiary wasn't the American farmer but the Canadian greenhouse operator. Canada's technological edge is now deeply embedded in the U.S. food chain. Mexico faces a tough road to recovery and must diversify to survive. The era of cheap Mexican winter tomatoes is over. This is a lesson in the volatility of global trade and the power of policy. Technology can create new winners and losers overnight. Next time you slice a tomato, remember its journey. It's a story of politics, technology, and a multi-billion-dollar shift that changed your world.